No one in German Southwest Africa expected that Lothar von Trotha would turn a colonial uprising into an explicit campaign of annihilation. Yet that is precisely what unfolded between 1904 and 1908, an episode of planning, cruelty, and deliberate concealment that today historians call the Herero and Namaqua genocide. At the turn of the century, the vast sweep of what is now Namibia had been carved into farms and mining concessions by German colonists. Land was seized, cattle confiscated, traditional leaders displaced. Resentment simmered. In January 1904, the Herero rose, attacking farms and killing settlers in a desperate bid to halt dispossession. The revolt spread. The colonial government branded it rebellion and called in the Schutztruppe, imperial troops under new leadership from an officer who had little patience for restraint, General Lothar von Trotha. Military confrontation culminated at Waterberg in August 1904. Von Trotha's forces encircled the Herero, who broke through the German lines and fled east into the Omaheke Desert. What followed was no chaotic byproduct of war. It was a policy. On October 2nd, 1904, von Trotha issued what the German press later termed a Vernichtungsbefehl, an extermination order. He declared that the Herero would not be allowed to remain in the land. Those who surrendered would be shot. Wells were blocked and patrols sealed the desert's edges. Men, women, and children were driven into a landscape where death by thirst was certain. Alongside battlefield killing, a network of camps and forced labor depots was erected, most notoriously Shark Island near Luderitz. There, prisoners were worked to death on coastal projects and in the nearby diamond fields, starved, denied medicine, and exposed to brutal punishments. Tens of thousands of Herero and Nama perished from dehydration, starvation, disease, and the harsh conditions of captivity. Colonial administrators and private concessionaires profited. Land and cattle were declared ownerless and redistributed. Companies snapped up tracts of fertile country, and the labor-starved mining economy gained cheap, coerced workers. The conspiracy lay not simply in brutality, but in orchestration and concealment. Military orders, administrative decrees, and commercial gains lined up. Newspapers in the metropole praised the suppression. Colonial officials in Berlin argued over proportions, not the morality of what had been done. Scientific and academic institutions abetted the erasure. Bodies and skulls were removed for racial study, displayed in museums and university collections across Germany. Photographs, bureaucratic files, and shipping manifests, evidence of what had happened, were scattered among corporate ledgers and military dispatches, often labeled as necessary records of pacification and progress rather than proof of atrocity. Resistance did not end. Leaders like Samuel Maharero escaped into exile. Others, including the charismatic Jacob Marenga, continued guerrilla campaigns until 1907. Yet the combination of extermination policy, resource seizure, and institutional denial left a demographic and cultural devastation. Decades later, the German state and corporations would largely avoid full accountability. Within Germany, a mixture of denial, nationalist pride, and the politics of empire ensured that the episode faded from popular conscience for generations. This is a story of how a colonial administration, a military commander, and commercial interests conspired, through orders, economic design, and the suppression of evidence, to remove an entire people from their land. It is also the story of the long shadow that such state-sponsored violence casts. Graves unmarked in the desert, collections of human remains in distant museums, and communities stripped of elders and resources. The facts are stark. Concerted orders to drive populations into lethal environments, camps built to exploit captive labor, and the systematic appropriation of land and livestock. The truth survived in survivor testimony, missionary reports, diplomatic papers, and the archives that bureaucrats thought would be forgotten. Today, scholars and descendants continue to unpack the documentary trail.